Do you want to be wise? If so, then you must learn how to discern. To judge well is to discern, and to be wise is to apply the knowledge you have learned. This is a channel about typology, so it makes sense for me to heavily use examples from what I have observed in this sphere to speak to you today about the power of discernment. What I am sharing here today can be applied to other areas of your life as well, and I hope you will be able to make the connections, because what I desire to do here is make you think, to stretch your mind beyond where it was before you listened to my words, and then to go on and apply it in your own life. I'd like to start today with a question. How many of you believe yourself to have a high level of knowledge about certain subjects which you were never formally schooled in? In other words, do you have a high level of knowledge in subjects where you are self-taught, where you've spent years studying something and you haven't gone to a college or a university or a technical school to understand this subject? How many of you could sit down with me and share with me your expertise on certain subjects you have learned throughout your life, through studying, reading, listening to lectures, personally observing, personally gathering data about, experiencing, and writing about your observations, etc.? I have a high level of respect for someone who is self-taught. I'm always interested in people who teach themselves things, and I love to hear them talk about what they know because it comes from an interesting place. They can speak about it passionately. This person has delved into a subject purely from self-interest. They weren't required to learn about this thing. This could be true when you go to college, when you take up a certain subject or major. You studied a certain subject area because you wanted to. You weren't forced. But there's a difference. If you go to college to study a particular subject matter, there's still a difference here. Self-taught people tailor what they learn to suit their interests. You are going to put as much into it to match your passion in that particular area. If you have a passion and you go to higher education to study this thing, you're not completely in control of this learning. You're entrusting someone else to give you the information. Yes, to a degree, it is up to you how much you learn if you do the work required, but we could all agree that you are sitting in classes and doing classwork which is dictated to you by another, teacher, professor, etc. They control your learning in a way. They can control the pace of your learning, or they try to anyway. There is an expectation that you won't leave that class and learn much more on your own. The teacher will start next day's class picking up where they left off. They will assume you haven't learned any more. You can certainly go above and beyond what you're learning in the class, but for the sake of argument, let's just compare it that way. What I'm trying to argue here is that there are two different approaches. One is self-directed, one is not. This can make a difference in the final product. I remember thinking about this in great depth probably 10 years ago. Something made me think about all the things I had learned since I left formal education. I was reflecting on what was self-taught as opposed to what was learned formally. I went to school 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade. Then I attended a 4-year college, followed by a master's degree. So I have a lot of formal education. Looking back, I wouldn't say I didn't learn anything in my formal education. That would be foolish. But to be honest, many of the things I know the most about, the things I can speak the most passionately about, are things I never received any formal education in. My formal education is in music and education. You could say I have a higher level understanding of music and teaching. Of course I do. However, I do believe the majority of things I learned about music and teaching came after I left college. But I will speak to this later. I've observed that some people value authority, or what they would call the way things have always been done. If something is wrong with me from a health perspective, for example, the majority of my people are going to heavily rely on doctors when they advise me that I need to see a doctor. After experiencing tragedy in my life, I was told I needed to have counseling, I needed therapy. Their first recommendation is all the traditional avenues. I'm not wired that way. That's not the way I see things. I don't trust someone in a higher level position just because they're in this position. It's what you've always heard if you go to the doctor for a diagnosis. People would say you should always get a second opinion. There's a higher understanding in this, and it has less to do with consulting medical professionals and more to do with discernment. It's basically saying you don't just go to the first source and believe what they tell you. You should consult other sources to confirm or to give you more information about your problem. But you have to be at a certain level where you can discern what one professional has to say versus another. And how do you get there? I can give a personal example here. I have a loved one who had a surgery. The surgery went well, but several months later, this person started experiencing pain in the surgical area and went to the doctor to figure out what was going on. The doctor said scar tissue was causing the pain. Scar tissue had built up underneath the skin and around the incision area, and the doctor's solution to the problem was to operate again and scrape out the scar tissue. Now, if you have half a brain, I think you can see the problem with his solution, right? Because this person is going to go back in for another surgery where they're going to scrape the scar tissue out, and a couple months later, what's probably going to happen? The scar tissue is going to grow back, and now it will be even worse because you've cut into the body 2 times instead of just once. The opinion of this professional was that there was only one solution, and that's to come back and have another surgery. This person didn't want another surgery, and I don't blame them because I wouldn't want that either. So I did some research, and I found some interesting information out there about castor oil. That castor oil, when applied to the skin, can dissolve scar tissue. Now you can say, where did you get that information? Were the people who posted this information doctors and medical professionals? Did they have formalized training in medicine? The people who posted had direct experience in their lives where they used this with success. They knew something about castor oil, the properties of castor oil. They had a hunch this could possibly work. So they tried it, and it worked. People who were self-taught about the benefits of natural medicine and castor oil. So I recommended this to this loved one. Within 1 or 2 months of application, great relief was experienced, and by 5 months, the scar tissue was almost completely dissolved. This was 14 years ago, and this person has not had a problem since with any additional growth. Appealing to authority, someone could have said, why are you doing that? Why castor oil? And I've been met with this before when I've tried to share what I've learned, let's just say about general health and good living. I'm usually met with disdain by certain types of people because I am not the authority. Who are you? You're not a doctor. You don't know anything. And that's the reasoning. I don't know anything because I'm not a doctor, and we should trust these people who have this piece of paper that say they're a doctor. And I'm not trying to throw doctors under the bus, not at all. It's all about discernment. Would I want someone operating on me who is self-taught? Probably not, because I don't know how you can operate on cadavers and practice operating outside of getting a degree. So there are some cases where, in the case of a surgeon, yes, I would probably trust the person who has training over the one who does not. But again, this is a matter of discernment. It's not a blanket generalization. It's not just a blanket trust I have where I put all my faith into someone who holds the piece of paper. Would I trust the person who holds the degree over the one who does not? It depends. Would I trust the person who does not hold the degree over the one who does? It depends, and there are many factors to consider. This channel is about typology. Obviously, this is one of my passions, so I look around a lot and observe. And what I'm seeing in typology is sort of this kind of thing. It's interesting to me because I'm starting to see many people who are appealing to authority when it comes to typology. And I have to ask myself, why is that? It's interesting that people are quick to jump on the bandwagon of those who are trained, who are going to school to study these things, and also that they put so much trust in people who claim certification in MBTI. Now, if you've looked into this to get MBTI certification, first of all, you have to pay around $2,000 to get it, and it's literally a 3-day course. Now tell me, how do you make the claim you trust someone who's learned to type someone in 3 days? And at the end of the 3 days, they're given a piece of paper that declares them certified in this, and now they're able to type people and make concrete observations about people because they've sat in workshops for 3 days. So when people appeal to the authority of the MBTI certification, I have to shake my head because I've looked into it and I know what it is. But does this mean I discard all who have MBTI certification? Certainly not. But again, this has to do with discernment. Some people are shrewd and play the game because they know people will give them more credibility because of this certification, thereby allowing them to sell whatever it is they are trying to sell. On the other hand, some do it because they have a lifetime of study and just decide to get the certification as a means to further understanding. Whether it is or not is a matter of discernment. But people can have good intentions in obtaining certification just as well as they can have dishonorable intentions. When I see people who are calling those people who don't have any formal education in psychology, and by the way, formal education in psychology does not include MBTI training because that is not recognized as credible by the university. When I see people who say others have no right to be doing this because they're amateurs, meaning not formally educated in this, I have to scratch my head, because this is not a wise way of thinking, or it shouldn't be anyway. I would not discredit someone and their knowledge and call them an amateur because they have no formal training in something. What it comes down to is discernment. So to call out all people who make type videos without formal education and research, and I've seen this comment actually, accusing people of not knowing what they're talking about because they haven't done the formal research or whatever, and to call them amateurs is not correct. I don't believe people who make type videos without formal education are all amateurs. Again, that's a blanket generalization, just like you can say you can only make videos about type if you're MBTI certified, or if you have a psychology degree or a doctorate in psychology or whatever. The truth lies somewhere in between, and the truth can only be found through discernment. Going back to what I said earlier about music in college, I went to a 4-year college and got a music education degree. I'm not going to say I graduated knowing nothing because that is certainly not true. But when it came to music education, because I was going straight into the public school classroom, I felt woefully unprepared for what I was doing. I remember thinking to myself the week before school started, what am I going to do on the first day? I had no idea what I was going to do on the first day of school. No one ever sat down and explained the nitty-gritty of day-to-day teaching in my 4 years of college. Here I am, getting ready to step into my first professional position as a teacher, and I had no idea what to do the first week. That's a problem. Why was I never instructed in this? I even went back to my college and asked one of my college professors this very question, and she had no idea how to answer me. You know what advice she gave me? Make name tags for the kids. Make name tags? That was her advice to me, this highly trained professional, for the first week of instruction in an elementary school music classroom. I should have known better than to ask. The very reason I was asking was because I didn't learn this from her in 4 years, so why should I think I would get the answer out of her with one direct question? But I digress. I was not prepared for what I was about to do, and I will say I learned how to become a good teacher by teaching. I kind of feel bad for those kids the first few years. They were sort of my guinea pigs, but that's the way it was. You have to do to grow. That's not going to be everyone's experience, of course. But I went to a college that is ranked as one of the top 50 liberal arts colleges in the United States. You'd think the quality of education would be high. But that wasn't the case in the music education department. There were a few excellent professors in the department, but the ones in the education side of things were very self-important. They didn't care about giving us a good education. It was all about them. There was a lot of infighting as well, and they didn't work as a team, and it was a train wreck. But all that to say, I learned everything about being a good teacher after I left school. I had to learn through trial and error. I had to find the balance somewhere in between. Okay, that didn't work. That lesson was a bust. What did I do? I had to self-reflect. What can I do better? I obviously lost the kids in that lesson. How can I keep them with me and keep a good pace? And that's how I learned to become an excellent teacher, through self-reflection and observations and critical analysis and observations through watching other teachers. I was very fortunate in my school because we had a peer coaching program where teachers were allowed to go into other teachers' classrooms and observe them and how they did things. It was an excellent way to learn more about the teaching profession. So I learned how to become an excellent teacher by doing it. I have to say I don't give much credit to my college or even that master's degree for being an excellent teacher. I didn't learn how to be a good teacher there. I learned how to be a good teacher through my self-directed interest and with the help of others. I guess you could say I became a good teacher in spite of my formalized education. Some other areas of interest I have, you can tell if you look at this channel. I'm very interested in birds, in particular birdsong and bird identification. Years ago, I knew I had an interest in birds, and I took it upon myself to learn more. So when I was driving to and from work, I would listen to birdsong identification CDs and figure out ways to remember them. And then I just jumped in. Hikes in the woods, field research, so to speak. I've recorded observations about the songbirds where I live. My journal has almost 20 years of personal observations of bird behavior. About 10 years ago, I paid money to go on a guided bird walk in the spring. The man who took us on the bird walk was an expert with all the degrees behind him. But I was pointing out things on the walk as we went along that he missed. That's not proof of his illiteracy because he knew what he was doing. We were just at different points in the trail. But it made me think. I believe I could lead a bird walk every bit as good as he did, but I don't have the paper to prove it. I don't have the degree in natural science that says I'm a bird expert. However, I'm quite confident in my birding skills, honed over decades. This is a subject area I've intensely studied and have a high level of knowledge in, but who out there in the world is going to give me any recognition for it? Because I don't have the paper behind it. So right now, I could start making videos on YouTube about birds and bird identifications. You could go with me on a bird walk and call me an amateur, but when I keep correctly identifying bird after bird based on their song, then after a while you might start to realize I do know what I'm talking about. Someone could come along and say, "Who are you? You're just an amateur," because I don't have the degree. But is it unfair to dismiss me like this? Should we say, let my work speak for itself? Is this idealism talking? More on this in a bit. I have a level of expertise in needlework. I've been doing needlework for 3 decades. I know all about linens and fibers. I've designed my own needlework patterns. I know a lot about that field. Do I have any education at all in art, graphic design, textiles, etc.? I have absolutely nothing in that area. I took 1 art class in high school and that was it. So someone could come along and say I know nothing about needlework because I don't have the paper to show I'm an expert. You're just an amateur, they could say. But in my home, the walls are lined with pieces I've designed and stitched and framed. I've taught other people how to stitch. But a fool would say, "You're just an amateur. You know nothing about this." And leaving my own small world of personal experience, what would we say about those people in the world who truly accomplished great things, yet did not finish school or attend a college or university? Do a simple search, and you will find many throughout history who were not educated in the way we define it today. They had a passion to learn and a drive to share that learning with the world. But permit me to argue with myself here. Is this idealistic thinking that we can expect an easy path these days without the degree and credentials? Because sometimes we need to realize, as much as we hate to admit it, this is the way the world currently works, and sometimes you have to play the game. In other words, if you want the recognition or you want the funding to study in a particular area or you want a certain job, you may have to play the world's game to get you where you want to go. You have to get the degree, get wisdom in the world's eyes to put yourself where you want to go. However, is this what people in typology are doing? I'm not sure. I don't think they are thinking this way. I really believe they believe that degrees, certification, research, etc., defined as the way the world defines it, equals expertise. And this creates a problem and a gap between those who think this way and those who do not. And I believe there is a reason we are seeing this, which I'll touch on a bit later on. When people come into typology, they are unsure, which is completely natural. And I understand because 10 years ago, I had never heard of MBTI or cognitive functions or anything like that. But what I do have is a very interested mind, especially when it comes to people. And I'm not the only one like this with an interested mind. Personally, I've studied people since I was aware of myself as a person. So now I have decades of data of studying people, thousands of people in my life who have crossed paths with mine. This makes sense to me, this system. I have a wealth of data at my fingertips, people, so I can compare and contrast what I've observed about them. Now that I have a name for it, it's all connecting up. Do I have a formal degree? I don't have a piece of paper. I don't value the paper for the paper. There has to be something behind it. Just because someone says they're MBTI certified, I won't necessarily throw that out because perhaps they've been certified after many years of their own self-directed learning. But on its own, I don't give it much credibility. You can look at this channel here. What formal expertise do I have in being an INFJ type? Is there a school you can attend to get your degree in all things INFJ? No, there isn't. What I have is my experience, living in my skin as who I am, being able with discernment to reflect on my own cognitive processes, being able to reflect on the way I process information, the way I process feelings. I've also observed others who are INFJ types and studied them very closely. I've taken all this and synthesized it into this channel. Now, would you say I'm an amateur? And would you cast me aside because I have no formal training? I don't have MBTI certified training. I have no degree in psychology. I haven't read all the works of Carl Jung. You could certainly call me an amateur. You are welcome to say that. You can come here and discern if what I say here holds true. Then it's your decision to listen or not. It's on you to go visit all the sources and weigh them to find out what's true. That's what I encourage everyone to do. And this is something worth pointing out. For people out there who are accusing others of being an amateur, it's very hypocritical because you yourself probably don't live by this view. In other words, you don't believe it either. I would think there are many people in this world who have expertise in areas in which they were never formally trained. We can all name people like this. So people who are specifically calling out others in this typology sphere as amateurs would then turn around and accept the knowledge of someone else, or even themselves outside of the sphere in another subject area without formalized training, which is hypocritical. I understand this behavior, this calling others out as amateurs in some instances, because this is in context of a dog-eat-dog world. Everyone's in the race for the top. Who's going to get there first? You have to see that too. You have to be able to honestly look around and see that as well. I also believe this is a reflection of the current state of the world, because there is a push to separate the professionals from the amateurs, and there's a reason for this push. Years ago, higher education wasn't available to all, and people trusted more in their own know-how. There weren't specialists for this and that. You want to build a house? There was no one to hire. You had to learn about it and do it yourself. You want to learn all about herbs and herbal medicine? Ask your grandmother. She was the higher education of the day. We've been dumbed down to believe that we can only do one specific thing and that we should trust all the other areas to experts to be cogs in a wheel. This is the larger problem right now in society, and it reflects in typology, where people parrot what they've been trained to think, that only experts should be trusted. But to dig deeper into this would be to go afield from my original topic, something for you to think about anyway. This is the whole argument with the internet, about regulating the internet. Yes, there is much out there on the internet which is truly garbage, but there are also excellent things as well. Using the internet requires discernment. This is why parents have to be careful of their children, because children cannot discern. They are immature and they lack the skills to do so. So the parents have to discern for the children when it comes to using the internet. They have to filter the information so their children are not harmed. At the same time, parents have a responsibility to begin teaching their children how to discern. It's a fine line and a very important job. But we're not children here. We're all adults. And sadly, we can't assume all adults know how to discern. Many do not. They automatically trust authority just because it's the authority, or they trust someone else because they like that person. This is what we find online nowadays. This is what really makes people aggravated, and I understand why, because some come at this field of typology with very pure intentions. They do have a certain level of expertise from years of personal observations and study on their own, and then they see the garbage out there and they get angry. They say, it's hurting people, it's harming people. And I can understand that. I feel that way to a degree myself because I do care. And I think some people do come into this fairly innocently, eyes wide open when first hearing about this and wanting to learn. However, we are all responsible for ourselves as adults, and we all have to learn how to discern. And sometimes, learning how to discern is a hard lesson to learn. You have to make mistakes in judgment in order to know what you are discerning. You can't be afraid of failure. Sometimes we have to fail to learn. That's how you learn discernment. It's like the proverbial little child who touches the hot stove. Mom says, don't touch the stove. The stove is hot. I've discerned this. I'm the older person. I know. I've touched the stove. I've known other people who've burned their hands off touching the stove. Don't touch the stove. But what happens inevitably is you always have that one child who is going to touch the stove and they're going to burn themselves. And you know what? That's how they learn. They learn never to touch the stove again through experience. And I think most of us are like that. We must learn through experience. And I think this is the case here. Sometimes people have to be allowed to fail. They have to be challenged in that way to be able to weigh on the scales what is right and what is wrong. That's how we learn discernment. So in some ways, this is a necessary lesson for people to learn. This is where people get overzealous, though, in their condemnation of certain channels and people because they think those people are harming others. And are they? Perhaps they are, but we're not talking about children here. We say they are harming other adults, and you can't police the adult world in this way. You can't treat other adults as if they're children and you're the parent. We can't go around policing people saying, so-and-so shouldn't have this channel. They don't know what they're talking about. They're harming people. This is the internet, where everyone has an opinion. Whether it's an informed opinion or not is completely up to interpretation and personal discernment. Sometimes you have to know what's false to see what's true. Sometimes you have to know what's wrong to know what's right. I don't have a problem with all these channels that are out there from this harming others perspective because, yes, there are people who are giving false information, but adults are ultimately responsible for themselves. They will make their own decisions about who they're going to listen to, who they're going to follow, what they're going to think. Everyone in this sphere has an agenda, make no doubt about it. But saying that, an agenda is not always nefarious. People with typology channels could truly desire to help people and make an honest living, or they could be in it to make a killing off of it dishonestly. When it comes down to it, people who follow channels with misleading information, a lot of times they follow them because they like the person who runs the channel or who makes the videos. They are invested in that person. And we have to realize that someone who comes along from outside of that channel, who comes along and sees misleading information and wants to speak reason in the comment section, you're not going to be heard. Because the one you are addressing is personally invested in the channel, in the person. They like the person and will be automatically biased against you because you are criticizing the one they like. I've seen these comments. It doesn't matter that you're wrong. We like you for who you are. They say it. They've put their cards out there. It's obvious to see. So when you come along and try to fight this misinformation, it's taken as a personal fight. You are playing a fool's game because these people love this video creator and you're not going to get anywhere with them. That's something to consider. You can engage if you want, but know what you're up against. So we can call out people because they're wrong based on what we've intelligently weighed and believed to be true. But to call out people in general based on our feelings that they are harming people in a world of adults is not very productive. It's to play the parent in a world full of adults instead of engaging them in reason on an equal playing field. And whether or not it's equal from an intellectual viewpoint is again a matter of discernment, so choose wisely where you engage and how. I'm speaking to the people who honestly desire to learn. You can't reach people who don't want to learn, who are blind in a sense because they choose not to see. Those who are hooked to a specific person or system. They are invested in that person or system. You probably won't influence them or have success getting them off that track. Realize this and look for those who are honestly seeking knowledge. It's not impossible to learn or discern for yourself. There is a lot of information out there. I'm not going to say one person has the whole truth about it because that's not true. We all operate from bias, and I understand that. But we need to see it. Discernment recognizes bias. And because I understand that, I would never recommend that someone only listen to me, that I'm the only voice out there. I wouldn't say this about myself. I can't say this about myself. There are still things I don't understand about this subject area. On my channel here, I would never say you should only listen to me. I am one woman speaking out of my particular slice of experiences. I have followed a certain track, and I am who I am because of the path I've taken. I am who I am because of my past experiences and my genetics and how I was raised and all these things. I am one person. I would never recommend that you listen to me exclusively. The reason I would never say that is because I know I'm fallible. You could only listen to someone exclusively if they had all the knowledge in the world. And in typology, that person does not exist. That person does not exist in any subject area. So it's foolish to put all your eggs in one basket in that way. You should listen to as many people as you can. Again, it's all about weighing. You need to take in as much as you can in order to filter and sift to find out what you believe about a thing. There's something to learn from a lot of different sources. People can be mostly wrong and sometimes right. People can be mostly right and sometimes wrong. Admitting you don't know everything there is to know is to be honest, and that's how you keep learning. Then don't be afraid to make a judgment for yourself about what you believe, and then go from there. So maybe you're thinking, okay, I want to learn more about typology, but how do I learn how to discern, practically speaking? What does that look like? You have to keep a comprehensive picture of what you're looking at. This is not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but this is important to keep in mind when you visit channels. Judging intentions can be a good way to learn. Now, just because someone has an ulterior motive in things doesn't mean they can't be trusted. We all have ulterior motives. Can you judge the intent of the motive? Get an overall feel for what you're looking at. What is this person's objective here? What are they trying to accomplish? Is it entertainment? If it is, then perhaps you should take it with a grain of salt and enjoy it for what it is. If it's entertainment, that might not be the place you want to get serious information in your quest for higher understanding. Is there a hard sell? Again, this is not always an indicator you should run away. There's nothing inherently wrong with putting a price tag on your expertise, so to speak. If someone really believes in what they're doing, there's nothing wrong with trying to put that forward. I think a lot of times we have a suspicion about this. This person can't possibly be an INFJ because they're marketing something. That's baloney. Yeah, I think it's hard probably for an INFJ to market themselves. And you can see the ones out there who are doing it. It is a little bit awkward. But if you really believe in something, if you have confidence in your product, at some point you do have to sell it to others. That's just the name of the game, right? People might not notice something unless you put it out in front of their face. But you can discern people's intent. What is the intent, even in their marketing? What is their intention? Can you discern that? Can you gauge that? Can you tell that behind it all they truly have good intentions? Or can you tell that behind it all they don't? They only care about the bottom line, how much money they can make off you suckers. You have to discern for yourself. When you watch these people, can you see what their intentions are and what they do? I don't ever believe in following one person exclusively. We all have our favorites. Even for me, when it comes to certain things in my life I'm interested in, I have my favorites I keep returning to, listening to, reading information from. On my bookshelves, I may have a section where I have a particular author's books more than others. The thing is not to get yourself all caught up in that person exclusively. The wisest people consider a vast array of resources. Comment sections of videos are excellent. Many times I find such gems in the comment sections. You can read comments, see what people have to say. You can learn. Many people write fabulous comments, which are a wealth of knowledge. They might not have their own channel, but they're doing what we've been doing, self-directed learning. They've been doing the same thing. If you're so inclined, you could engage with certain people there. Pick their brains a little bit and see what they have to say. Don't be afraid to leave a comment, asking questions, or looking for clarification. That's another good way of learning. Bounce things off of others. If you don't have someone in real life to do this to, you can use the comment sections of videos as a place to do that. Hopefully, you have people in your real life you can speak to about things. Ask your loved ones questions. They don't have to understand cognitive functions and such. You may have people in your life who are very self-aware people. They might not know what these things are called, but this doesn't mean they don't know or understand. Ask them questions about their own process. They're not going to use the jargon, my FE informed me, and stuff like that, but they can speak to their experience, to what they know about themselves, and you can learn so much. People don't have to understand type for you to be able to learn from them. You may type someone in your life, privately in your mind, and then specifically ask them questions to prove hunches you may have. Ask them about their process. Many people are honored when you ask them about themselves in this way. Explain to me why you do this or why you do that. Many are very willing to talk about this. So use people in your real life as a resource. It has been the most useful for me to bounce things off of people who aren't like me. We all have blind spots. I've spoken of bias. My bias is not your bias. If you want to learn more, a good way of doing it is to question someone who is not like you, or to bounce your ideas off of that person and see what they have to say about it. What can they add? What can they refine in your own process? What can they challenge you on? What can they agree with you on, and why? I think discerning people use people in their lives to sharpen them. Remember, though, iron sharpens iron, so choose wisely. It's not like you can't learn from ignorant people, but you aren't going to be sharpened by them over time. Whereas if you spend time with learned people who themselves understand wisdom and discernment, then you will be naturally sharpened as a result of being around that person. This is my encouragement to you today. Learn to discern. Weigh everything you read and listen to. Process it, reflect on it, write about it, think about it. You'll be surprised how far you can go with an interested mind, with a will to learn and a burning passion. You can go far in any subject area, and when all is said and done, you don't need the piece of paper to prove it. I'm confident in what I do here and believe my work speaks for itself. You can do the same. Discern and apply what you've learned so your work can speak for itself. But ultimately, learn how to discern so your life speaks for itself.